Hi everyone, welcome to this Amplify session on the edge of artificial intelligence. My name is Mark Jokum. I work currently in the platform development team here at AMP, and I'm very, very honoured to be hosting this event with our guest speaker, Dr. Bernard Meyerson. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. For those of you who don't know, there is a Tesla car downstairs on the ground floor for anyone who wants to check it out. It's pretty awesome for those of you who haven't been in one. Please be involved in the discussion on social media, hashtag Amplify 2017. Also want to give a warm welcome to members of the board from AMP, staff, customers, and anyone joining us on the stream as well. It's great to have you here as well. Just in terms of how the session will run, Bernie will come up and speak for about 40 minutes. We're then going to do about 15 minutes of Q&A and hope to get you out before 5 to 1. Just before I introduce Bernie, also if you want to log on to the Amplify Wi-Fi, the password is Amplify 2017. That gives you access to afr.com if you want to access that for information as well. I'm personally very, very excited about the session on artificial intelligence. For those of you who don't know, IBM Watson, absolutely incredible what they're doing in this space, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Chief Innovation Officer of IBM, Dr. Bernie Meyerson.
Good day. That's the only Australian I speak, so we'll do the rest in English. Sorry, guys. Can't resist. Cheap shot. Moving right along. Look. This is a bit of a fascinating field, as you guys know. It's moving at a ridiculous pace. But what tends to happen is people tend to think of it as poof, we have AI. And as you guys know, I mean, let's think about this. One of the favorite things used to be the Turing Test, right? Can I fool somebody that there's somebody behind the screen when in fact it's just a computer? Alan Turing was doing computing in World War II. This is not a new field. And it has moved at an incredibly slow pace in spite of all the exponentials one see. It's kind of like batteries. Batteries are not like chips. Putting it another way, you could power the entire planet from a double A cell if they made the progress chips had made. They tend to be linear. I mean, Mother Nature has a sense of humor. And she basically played it on batteries, which is they tend to go linearly, which is a huge problem. In any case, AI has behaved like that. However, it didn't just appear. Right? It was created, and it was created over decades, and there are lots of people who contributed to it. And the contributions came in a bunch of different areas. The particular ones that were important, of course, were big data and the analytics to understand it. Those were really behind it, and if you don't enable both of those, you might as well go home. You will not get anywhere. Now, it's very helpful to define the term big, and we've seen lots of examples of it. It's one of the dangers of speaking in the middle of a conference like this. I've seen 500 people wave around, various size charts. But it is remarkable in that when you look at things like a single oil rig offshore, this thing has something on the order of about 80,000 sensors. It'll throw off something in the neck of the woods of 15, 20 petabytes of data in the course of its lifespan. That is an extraordinary amount of data. And the interesting thing is it's been doing this for the better part of a decade, and yet nobody was using it. It's what they call dark data. Dark data is an incredible opportunity and a bit of a sin, because sometimes you could have learned a hell of a lot from it had you looked. And the challenge we have is many people hadn't thought to just take a look. Similarly, consumers, they throw off now well in excess twice this, 500 million tweets and about 55 million, give or take, Facebook updates a day, which probably proves that you need to, A, not do it when you're driving and get a life. But leaving that aside, it's a tremendous source of information. And what it really provides you with, and what's somehow gotten lost, is it gives you velocity. The velocity of business today is almost unimaginable, because the feedback that used to be, well, we'll wait a couple of quarters and see how those sneakers sell in the market, is a matter of hours, because by the time you release it to the first couple of thousand people, they look at it and they comment. Your feedback is near instantaneous. You had better have a way of dealing with that, or else your competitor basically will deal with it, and by the time you get around to it, you won't be there anymore. Smart devices in a home, connected devices, they're still relatively rare, They're getting there. But I spoke about 3 years ago in Dubai after the CEO of Samsung, and one of the things I found rather interesting is he said, look, by the year 2020, every device we sell will have connectivity. every device. I don't care if it's a toaster, a water filter, it will all be connected. So recently, I won't say the brand, I got, my house is 20-odd years old, one of the control unit on our ovens died. So okay, we bought new ovens. And it's great, they come with connectivity and you can start them remotely from your cell phone and all that. The very first thing I did was take apart the control panel and did a Wi-Fi-ectomy. I'll explain the reasons for that later, though I think any of you who are familiar with cyber would understand why you probably don't want to stick a roast in the oven, be away, and somebody decides to hack in and set it to, self-clean at 800 degrees Fahrenheit, in which case you come home and the only thing that isn't cooked is your roast. It's incinerated and your house is cooked. Again, beware of what you wish for. These things don't operate in a vacuum, and it's very, very important to take a bunch of steps back and just look at the environment in which we're all working. Because much as I love technology, I've been a hardcore techie all my career, I tend to be very circumspect about what happens if you're not careful and you don't think holistically about everything, not just about the gee whiz factor, which is very tempting. It's the siren song. You'll throw off, give or take, about 300 million books of medical data. That's astounding because that's each of you. This is quite a library. The challenge you have to ask yourself is, so should we be storing data? Everybody says right now, let's store data. And if there are any manufacturers of storage here, oh, good. Don't store data. You want to store knowledge. If you try to store all the data, you will drown. Somebody once commented on medicine, it's basically physicians are drowning in an ocean of data. You want to store knowledge, and the previous speaker did a great job of pointing that out at a velocity I can't even begin to match. That's the first, apparently, in my career. It really is important because if you do not understand what you're looking at, if you haven't looked at the data and the consequences and all the other elements around it, the consequences are extreme. They are dire. I don't care whether your offshore platform misbehaves and causes an environmental wreck, and or you miss an element in the financial market that implies a meltdown that, frankly, you need to avoid unless you want to have the world sit in a recession for the next 10 years. These things all have an impact on life on this planet. And as all of us participate in this business, we better pay attention to it. Now, if you look at why is it we spent this huge amount of effort looking after analytics. I mean, we started about 20 years ago acquiring companies like Cognos and SPSS and Netezza. These guys, give or take, the investment there was of order of magnitude about $17 billion and about another $8 billion integrating them. I mean, you're spending $25 billion on a field that was just barely going. But the reason is you needed an underpinning. The story behind the evolution of Watson is sort of, it's not what one would think. It wasn't quite as orderly as one would have hoped. In fact, that came about because somebody was sitting in a bar and heard the television was playing, of course, and then suddenly the bar went silent. This is never a good thing when you're in a bar and it goes silent and the TV's on, because usually it's something horrible. So he went running out to look, and it turns out it was just the show Jeopardy! And one of the champions, Ken Jenner, who'd won something like 80 consecutive games, was playing the 81st, and everybody was really watching this guy who's amazing. But the fellow who did this actually was the head of our software group, and he remembered there was a guy mucking around with a Q&A system, and he called him up and he said, hey, Dave Ferrucci is the guy. He said, Dave, do you think we could win at Jeopardy? And Dave, being a typical IBMer, said, oh, absolutely. At that time, the system Dave had could get 10% of the questions that he queried it with correctly after 3 hours. A Jeopardy champion gets 90% correct in 3 seconds, and Dave is sitting there saying, sure. 80 man-years of effort later, seriously, 20 people, 4 years, it actually creamed these two guys who had actually been the most prolific champions at Jeopardy. But again, nothing happens overnight. And that's something that's very, very important. Now, why do we care? There's always a commercial, a human part of this. From the commercial side, we actually engaged Statoil, and this stuff is not brand new. This goes back about 4 or 5 years now. And when you have the capability to do deep analytics, what if you had all this data, these petabytes of data, and you not use them? Well, if you go back and you say, all right, I'm going to look at every event, for instance, that drives a maintenance function. Why? Because they have 40 offshore oil platforms. Just to do maintenance on one is a 98,000 man-year effort. 98,000. I mean, this is a ridiculous amount of effort. And so we went through an optimization saying, look, How about we look at the behavior, let's say, of a multi-million-dollar pump on the ocean floor, and just by looking at the vibrational characteristics, run through a Fourier transform, turn it into frequency space, and look for what happens in terms of that frequency moving around as it ages. Can we predict when it'll fail? And if we can, why don't we just do maintenance based on need as opposed to time, right? Intelligence. And this is done across the board. When you do it holistically, remember what I said, when you step back and you really tackle things in a broad sense, then what you wind up with is an interesting financial outcome. We couldn't agree with these guys as to what the outcome was worth, so we called in a bunch of forensic accountants from the independent third party, the Norwegian Oil Industry Association. They showed up and gave us the most horrific answer I've ever heard, which is they said we had just saved the client $50 billion in the next 5 years. Of course, we charged, I think, $3 million to do the work, so we basically gave a medal to all those involved in the process, and then we shot them. You know, sorry guys, you missed by 3 digits. In any case, the point is, the way you learn is you just do. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to show later is not theoretical, it's actually in use. Because the most valuable thing you get is getting from the theory to the practice at a high rate of speed. You're going to fail, but if you're going to do that, fail fast and move on. All I remind my people is, for crying out loud, don't learn everything that way. Get it right once in a while. There's a great quote from Ann Winblad. She said, basically, data's the new oil. And it's perfect, right? If you don't refine it, it has no value. It's just muck that takes up space. You refine it, it'll run the world. This is a very, 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 very insightful comment, because this wasn't, again, today. This goes back 5, 10 years. All right, so why did AI develop? Where did it, you know, what drove it where we had to make these huge investments to make this happen? And that's pretty much an explanation. That is affectionately we call these things spaghetti diagrams. We made the mistake of asking a client, well, you know, what's your problem? He was complaining that every 3 months their entire global system crashed. And we said, well, do you have an application diagram? And he hands us this. And he says, by the way, that's not the problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, well, within each of those little boxes is another diagram that looks pretty much like this. You know, so we left the room laughing and never went back. No. Basically, this is where complexity becomes overwhelming. And you then have to ask yourself, have we disrupted the digital disruption? Right? Everybody wants to become digital. Great. You have now driven complexity to a level that actually a steady state, reasonable operation condition is almost unattainable, because if something goes wrong, you will never find it. And this basically is what drives you to the cognitive era. It's not that we're not talking about, you know, working so that somebody who's sitting at a desk answering a phone, we get better answers through avatars. This is not at that level. We're talking about where complexity of what we have developed simply outruns the human ability to deal with it. And it's already happened. It's happened years ago. And it was causing all kinds of lumps and bumps as people went forward with digitization. And yet every industry feels the need. Now, here's where we get to the question about what is AI. You know, classically, we talk about artificial intelligence. To begin with, I object to the term only because when you look up artificial in the dictionary, a synonym is fake, and fake intelligence is stupid, and Lord knows this is anything but. I also, unfortunately, have to deal with the baggage. Those of you who've, how many people, you know Stanley Kubrick's famous 2001 Space Odyssey? Oh, please. Yeah, okay, you can admit it, we're that old. In that film, as you recall, this very sweet voice says, "Good morning, Dave," as it's murdering everybody this guy loves and then tries to kill him just to make things complete. You know, that's baggage. If you don't like that, we can talk about Terminator. So AI has picked up so much junk. I just said, well, let's call it augmented intelligence, anything but artificial intelligence. It's actually not a joke, because if people don't generally accept this, it ain't going to happen. All the wonderful things we show here, all the capabilities, if there isn't a general acceptance, people will not accept it. And they also have another fear. And it's a real fear. I work as part of the World Economic Forum, as part of the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution. The concern is there's an estimate that in the next 20 years or so, 30% of the jobs in the world will go away based upon the evolution of this intelligence. This is not a small problem, and we need to deal with it. But what we're talking about here, to be clear, is the other side of that coin, which is people show up here, and we bring our skills, our compassion, intuition, our design thinking, value judgment, and some of us even bring our common sense. What computers do that we don't do well is deep learning. That's one of the marvels of AI. Discovery, when there are 5 variants, 10 variants, 100 variants in a process, human beings are not really good about telling which 6 are critical to success. In fact, we can't. You don't eyeball that. Similarly, large-scale math, well, by definition. The other thing is fact-checking, which from what I can tell nowadays is becoming really vital, and I'll just stop there. Don't get me going on that one. I could get myself in real trouble. But that's human and machine. It's not either or. And when you take human and machine, you get a very different outcome. One of the things I'm going to show is, along the way, is a video. It's not one done by us. It's actually done by an independent third party, Bloomberg News. But it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about here, plus what the capabilities of AI are.
Watson, who is David McCullough, correct?
IBM's Watson, the technology that beat 2 humans on Jeopardy 2 years ago, may be the technology that helps doctors beat cancer. Dr. Arthur Forney at WestMed Medical Group in New York is testing Watson in the form of an iPad app during its pilot phase. So here Watson was given a very unusual case, a young Asian woman, non-smoker, who has lung cancer.
So now you tell Watson to do its thing, and it's now looking at the data you inputted, the data from her imaging, from her biopsy.
In 17 seconds, Watson has analyzed about 3,500 textbooks and 400,000 other pieces of data.
This is the screen where it shows you that after looking at what you have so far, it would consider that you would do several other things for the patient that it doesn't see yet in the chart.
In an instant, Watson has figured out what caused this cancer.
It turns out she has a very rare genetic mutation, which is accounting for her cancer.
And offered 3 treatment options.
It has shown that treatment 1 has a 95% confidence of being effective, whereas treatment 2 is only half that.
Is this so obscure that you would have needed Watson for the diagnosis and treatment, or would an oncologist come up with the same treatment plan?
In fact, this is such a new discovery of this particular mutation, and it's a relatively new drug as well, that my guess is that many oncologists may not be quite up to speed yet.
I rest my case. It's human and machine. The value of human plus machine is much, much greater than the sum of the parts. And that's really the key here. And in point of fact, what gets lost is people say, well, you know, the machine gave an answer. What do we need, doctors for? Well, it did talk about 250,000 medical documents, 100,000 clinical trials. Guess who did all those? People. Jobs shift. They didn't go anywhere. In fact, I would love if that physician had more time to treat patients instead of struggling with an enormous patient load. That gets lost in the discussion. And oh, by the way, you need people who train the system. The corpus of knowledge this thing can handle is unimaginable. Now, here's the fact that scares people. You know how many papers a typical physician reads in a month? In 1 month. He will scan 6. 6. They would die of old age before being able to read everything that's in that corpus of knowledge, or even 5% of it. That's the point. That's not a criticism of a physician. It's a testimony to how fast the field is moving and how much information is being created. You can't lose sight of that. These things, it's not human versus machine. It's far from it, quite frankly. It's no different in financial services. Financial services are data-driven, and we're in this emergent era where you need to actually rethink how you do this, because it's going to have the same profound impact there as it's been having in all other fields. Now, there is a video, and I'm going to apologize in advance, because it actually is a real example, which is what I was trying to stick with. I don't want, we're going to do this. It's like this stuff works, but it ends up being a little, how should I put it, salesperson type. So I'm going to regret this, but I'll show it anyway, because it makes a good point, not to mention my team actually did the experiment that eventually led to this. I hadn't seen how it ended up. We'll go home and talk to marketing guys later. But in any case, there is a lot of power in any given industry. This is a very specific example. The financial sector, as you guys know, you have to basically survive and thrive on this digital disruption. Now, the thing that we have to address is this. If you think about it, the largest right now company in the planet that provides travel, of course, has no vehicles, right? The most popular media owner has no content, Facebook. Most valuable retailer, Alibaba, they don't hold any inventory. That's sort of odd. Similarly, largest accommodation provider, Airbnb, they don't have a hotel room. They have no real estate. So what I'm talking about then is, what do you do when you're the world's largest lender, wealth manager, and insurer, and you have no what? Because the question is, somebody's going to come along, as you guys already have seen, and take away the what? And you don't want to be the victim of that. You want to be the driver of it. And that's where it becomes important to sort of get ahead of the curve, because everybody faces the same issues. I don't care whether they're fighting with rapid digitalization. Customer expectations are changing. The baby boomers in the US are all aging out, and on and on and on. The last one is one, though, that I'm really disappointed because I haven't seen people talk about much, which is the dangers of cyber. I have no idea how bad that is. As much as you see in the papers, it's way worse. And it scares the hell out of me when we stand here and talk about we're all going to be interconnected and all our data and our medical and cars, and good luck with that. You need to keep this in mind. I'm not saying you stop, but to just talk about it in the absence of this scares me to death. Now, if you talk about why the complexity is going to the level that you need AI, that you need all of these capabilities, forgetting about the left and right just for a minute, just let me pick one real number. Just screwing up your compliance work, just missing on compliance, or even worse, just having the regulators think you missed on compliance. People spent about $300 billion arguing in court about this since 2011 to 2015. $300 billion down the drain for no reason. So again, the complexity is getting to the point people are having enormous challenges just keeping track. It's not by intent. So the challenges are just piling on. In terms of changes in the demographics, where you look at, for instance, moving from, to the millennials who are becoming a major source of wealth, this is a scary statistic. It turns out 71% would rather have their teeth drilled by a dentist than talk to their banker. Okay, probably want to do something about that perception, not to mention, of course, as a consequence, they're not terribly loyal clients. All of these challenges are not unique to any one entity. It's nobody's fault. They exist generically in the industry. So once again, you have to basically step back and say, at a holistic level, what am I missing? What am I not doing? How am I failing to engage? There's an endless list just by market. I don't care whether you're talking about everything from raising capital to how you handle payments, deposits, lending. All of these are being disrupted. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but I will provide copies of this to the forum. This, I think, is a great opportunity to just think about what it is you do about any one of these issues. But I just want to look linearly at one or two of these things. So looking at one digital dimension, this is an interesting one. If you look at insurance, keep in mind that everything is connected. I mean, interconnection, the Internet of Things, it's all hooked up, right? Well, that's your source of information. So if you take all of the data you've got, the liabilities, location data, your contact preferences, risk status, and their client behaviors, what if you apply intelligence to all of that, or any one of them? What can you do with that to change the relationship with that client and, frankly, get a better economic result for both the client and yourselves? That's the other thing about this. It needs to be win-win. If you're going to win people over, you got to show them that, by the way, this helped everybody involved. Like I said, this is the Gorpy one that I'm worried about, but I'll show it anyway and regret it later.
Let's say I'm a client relationship manager at an insurance company. I start by selecting rain, wind, and hail from the types of hazardous weather options that can trigger alerts. Next, I import my customers by uploading a simple CSV file. Now, I'm ready to put the weather company's high-precision algorithms to work to predict short-term threats with accuracy down to 500 square meters. Sometime later, I'm notified that the system has sent simple email or text message alerts to some of my policyholders, warning them of an approaching destructive hailstorm. I know that hail claims average 3,200 apiece, but also that historically, over half of people who receive an alert take action to avoid damage. On my dashboard, I can see which policyholders were in the storm's path and received alerts. Toggling over to my email inbox, I also see several notes of thankful appreciation from policyholders. The quarter is coming to a close soon, so I'll take the opportunity to expand the time span of my dashboard to see who's been alerted in advance of other past weather events. I use this information to generate a report of all policyholders who have not received any alerts so that I can seek out another meaningful opportunity to contact them to help strengthen our relationship. I also export data to Watson Analytics for future visualization of key performance indicators. In this demo, we've seen the power of using high-precision weather data to accurately alert policyholders in the path of a destructive weather event. 5 annual meaningful touch points like this have been shown to increase insurance customer retention by 5 percentage points. Weather company analysis has also shown that alerts like this can significantly decrease costly damage claims.
Okay, speaking of costly damage claims, so my daughter got her degree from Cornell University in the US in Ithaca, New York. The day before her graduation, myself, my mom, my brother, we all drove up in 3 vehicles on the way there, and we took a hotel in Binghamton, New York. We walk inside, and about 5 minutes later, hail the size of my fist starts falling out of the sky and promptly destroys all 3 vehicles, the damage to mine being $14,000. Needless to say, guess why when my team said, hey, we could do a demo on this, I said, yeah, that's the one. Personal experience. That worked out rather well, actually, because it is sort of a standard thing. The other thing I should point out, I don't know if you caught it, this thing is good to 500 square meters in terms of weather prediction. To give you a perspective, in the US, the National Weather Service guarantees only about 144 square kilometers, not meters. So, you know, high precision technology in all aspects can be of incredible value.
Hey.
Whoop. So there's one other thing, you know, in insurance, of course, there's risk. There's risk to people, there's risk to monetary, there's risk to assets. One of the more interesting things is in science fiction, you actually go back and change the future, right? It's not actually science fiction anymore in the next thing I want to show. And I'll stop at the end and describe some of the more subtle detail that gets lost in the commercial. But nonetheless, this was actually well done. It's actually a truism. I mean, it's simplified, but this is something that works.
Hey,
Pass, please.
I'm here to fix the elevator.
Nothing's wrong with the elevator,
Right,
but you want to fix it.
right.
So who sent you?
New guy,
What new guy?
Watson.
My analysis of sensor and maintenance data indicates elevator 3 will malfunction in 2 days.
There you go.
You still need a pass.
Yeah, there's always one of them. The fact of the matter is, predictive analytics, when you take intelligence into the fact and you normalize past behaviors, you understand the origins, you're not really managing risk, you're systematically eliminating it. That's a fascinating topic, the idea that you don't just have to assess the risk of a client, you can actually assess your ability to eliminate the very risks you're insuring against. And there are a couple of ways of driving margin. This is one of the more interesting ones. It sounds like science fiction, but it is not. And in fact, what it is Industry 4.0. You know, if you're interested in this, I volunteer, I chair a couple of committees in the World Economic Forum, one of them related to this. The evolution of industry so that we're actually using intelligence to drive industry actually will change the face of industry and change the face of risk within those industries. And the examples are legion. This is not new. The global impact of this will be profound, and it is vital to understand it because every picture I have up there actually relates to something we've already done. Publicly, I can talk about this. This is a fellow at Boeing who's actually literally using an air-powered system to attach the wings of aircraft. You really want to be sure you're attaching the wings firmly. If they fall off in flight, it's a really bad day for everyone involved. It turns out that those guns are regularly tested for being in spec, and if they are not in spec, they have a great name for it, you get soot. No, that's not the ashes of the burned aircraft. That's significantly out of tolerance. But you don't really want that, because if it turns out one of those things is operating below the specified torque, that means the nuts holding the wings on your 747 are loose, and you have to go out in the field, find that airplane, take apart the interior, and tighten the wings. Nobody really likes that experience, not to mention you wouldn't believe what it costs. The fact is, again, if you actually use intelligence to track each of those devices used in assembling the aircraft, you can eliminate that risk. And there are countless other examples which would take hours to go through. You know, just looking at Pratt & Whitney jet engines, you can predict they will fail weeks from now and say, by the way, take it out of service, take it off the aircraft and maintain it before you have a real problem. This is a new world where you can do this sort of thing. Another evolution, you know, which really is going to, I think, in the long term disrupt all of this, is the emergence of other technologies, one of which, for instance, is blockchain. It looks fairly simple. It's just you get a hyperledger, which basically is an immutable ledger of data, and you stop instantly and say, what do you mean it's immutable? You can fake anything, right? I got the ledger. Well, not hyperledger. Why? Because the way blockchain works is everybody on the chain gets an encrypted copy of the ledger. Yeah, so if somebody is a bad actor in one of the 47 people on the chain and starts altering their ledger, it doesn't help because the sequentially deposit data on everybody else's ledger isn't altered. And as a consequence, they're caught. This is a foundationally new way of thinking of working versus having classic ledger theory. Plus, you also can embed intelligence in this thing that looks for essentially bad actors. You can also embed intelligence that actually does all the steps that should be done if somebody at the beginning of the chain is shipping you something overseas and therefore they have to have customs documents and all that prepared. It does it automatically. It's called smart contracts. This is a very different world where every part of a supply chain is really on a unified entity. This is not theory. One of the things that I did recently, I was in Dubai to kick this off. The city-state of Dubai is taking their entire infrastructure up on a single hyperledger. Why? Because all of the different agencies, whether it was the healthcare agency, motor vehicles, business, if you looked at the record for an individual in each of those different agencies, they didn't match. Same person, different outcome. You probably would like them all to be the same. The argument used to be, well, we can't share it. Why should the guy at the Motor Vehicle Bureau have the data from the hospital? Well, wait a minute. They shouldn't have all the medical data, but you probably want to know if this person has seizures, blocks out, and loses consciousness occasionally. That could be a bad day when they're driving their car. The bottom line is you can actually encrypt the data so you selectively allow people to only see what they should. You can control access. But this, again, is emergent in business. It's emergent in government. It is not the future. It is now. It is actually physically happening. All of these things disrupt markets. And another area of disruption in finance. The strangest people are in banking. Starbucks. Anybody here know Starbucks runs a bank? I didn't think so. Guess what? They've got $1 billion afloat on their card. Starbucks said, yeah, we ought to set up a card. In the first few years, it grew by 2015 to $1.6 billion afloat on their cards. Just like that, bang, they're in banking, whether we like it or not. By the way, it's a lot more today. This is old data. Similarly, okay, remember, everybody here know a Square payment company? They basically come up with a way you take a little device, you stick it on your smartphone, and suddenly you're a payment organization. Well, that's okay, and that's where they started. But then they realized, we can use this places that are fast food, you know, you pay in advance, put your order in, and well, if you take the customer order, because again, you're doing all the payments on them, you do know what they ordered. So what the heck? Why don't we just, we're the guys who ship the order to the kitchen. I mean, makes perfect sense. I took it. I got the data anyway. Well, wait a minute. If I'm doing that, I know what goes into the food. I can do your inventory. That's interesting. And then the next thing you do is, oh, son of a gun. That means if I did your inventory, I know what you're spending, I know what you're earning, I can do your finance and accounting. Wow. And furthermore, because I know that, I can even do the lending because I know you're seasonal, you've got a cyclic, you're seasonally cyclic. And therefore, I know when you need loans. So what you've gone is, you again have a situation where the person with the data essentially surrounds an entire marketplace where you weren't even looking. And they do it at a rate of speed you wouldn't even imagine. So once again, there's a lot of disruption in the financial sector being driven by all of this. It continues on in many, many areas. In investment and wealth management, it's just a long list of companies that provide retail algorithmic trading. They actually even provide social trading. They create an ecosystem where people can actually share their insights into how to work with the markets. This is all now coming out, and this disrupts because, as you well know, there's been a relationship typically between a money manager, an investment advisor, and a client that is very much threatened by this. You can either ignore it or lead it. And usually leading it is a way better example than getting run over by it. But again, it isn't going to stop. The challenge is to know it's coming and to stay ahead of it. Now, there's this very common thread in everything I've shown, which is this digital disruption is being driven by big data, analytics, and the application of AI to it. So you got to ask, right, are there and where are the cognitive opportunities? This is an interesting thing. We actually went around about a year and a half ago and asked that question. Here's the good news. Those who lead large organizations in the financial sector were vividly aware of this. 98% of them said, yeah, this will be highly disruptive in the insurance industry where this was done, and said we need to get on with it. 85% believe they're going to make, a critical investment that will drive their future, and they're going to do investments, although they actually said in 2 years, which, by the way, from my perspective is too late, but at least they recognize that there is a need. So this is not something that's in dispute. The challenge, is getting people to do it. And the interesting thing is a bunch of folks jumped in, some of whom are name players, some of which I can't, unfortunately, share the name of, but you'll recognize some of the ones that are coming. Just Simple Financial Services Group, all we're doing is taking cognitive assets and analyzing the behavioral attributes of a client based on their history, their investment, their social media, if it's shared openly, and giving that information to the advisor, because suddenly that advisor becomes much more of a trusted entity because they actually know enough to give advice in the context of the person. I'm sure you've already seen this. Okay, there we go. A European bank, what they're doing is they actually, for instance, as you know, will preload with assets that they can trade on the stock exchange and such. By understanding their clients, they actually more accurately hold an inventory needed to supply those trades and such. Once again, getting ahead of the market just through clever use. REMAC. This is interesting. These guys, when you get an insurance claim, some of these things are complex, right? So you've got PDF documents up the wazoo, and you've got to go figure out, well, what reads on that claim? Is it valid? Is it covered by the document, especially if you're writing custom policies? We actually built something that can essentially take unstructured data, which is the great challenge in AI, and read through the document and only pull out the sub-element of that document that is specifically relevant to the claim being made. And what they found very rapidly is the same person can do the same bit of work in about 1/10 the time with greater accuracy. So you basically have 10x the speed with improved accuracy. I don't know about you, but when I do things 10x faster, it's not usually better. This is really a fairly remarkable number. And again, these things are this is stuff that's done. I was trying to be very careful. I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of blue sky stuff, and it looks really cute. And when you ask how much of it's out there, people say none. This stuff is in actual production in many cases. Risk. Swiss Re is one of the largest reinsurers. Once again, the insights that these guys get now are real time because you, again, have an intelligent agent where instead of providing you a search like, here's the 800 things about the company you're insuring, actually just pulls out things that are material to the discussion. It's no different than what was done for the physician in oncology. In oncology, you pulled out only the material things. Yes, this woman has a predilection towards this cancer based on a genetic defect we have a marker for. It did not give the 5,000 papers on genetic markers that lead to cancer. Similarly here, if you narrow it down, you can make a very precise decision on risk and how you mitigate and whether you even take on the business. And in the course of owning that business, you can assess what your status is on any given day almost instantly because of the rate and pace at which you can chew data. In the future, these things basically will be able to, for instance, go through as an example where you have disparate capabilities for using data in different countries. As you probably know, Barroso, who was the head of the European Commission, he actually resigned about 2 years ago to go teach in New Jersey. I found myself sitting next to this guy, and I said, why would you, no offense, New Jersey, but first of all, he said, let me correct you, it's Princeton, that's probably okay. He had a point. The other thing he said was, look, one of his pet projects in Europe was to unify how you can utilize data, the legalities of utilizing data. And as he put it, if F is a failing grade, I got a Z. It was hopeless. There are like 27 different systems for how you can use data, how much of it can. Some places you can't even take it out of the country. Well, what would happen if you actually were able to just analyze in every single country through an automatic system the data and apply it to a problem, but only export the metadata, not the personal data, the metadata from that analysis. So you could give an assigned risk score without actually taking the personal data outside. That kind of capability actually is being developed today and in fact is well underway. It's really a very different world where, again, all you're doing is giving spectacularly improved accuracy to your understanding of a situation. It's not magically running people off the field. Quite the opposite. It is giving you a picture of a clarity that one never had before, and that is a vital part of succeeding in business. Ignorance in business is not bliss. Speaking of not bliss, this is the one topic I've really just wanted to get to, which is a couple of years ago I gave my organization tends to do sort of really advanced stuff. Anybody here have a Xbox 360? You know, the last generation Xboxes? Yeah, a bunch of, nobody wants to admit it, they're all going like this. Yes, okay, we actually did that. Now, why would IBM do Xbox? I mean, Microsoft, I'm the Antichrist. But the first Xbox was a bit of a catastrophe, not because it didn't work, but because people hacked it within moments of its being released. And you sell the things for half what they cost to build, and you make your money on the software, but if somebody hacks it, they're not paying you for the software. And if you're an engineer, you think the solution is to, you know, you're losing $100 per box, so you make it up in volume. That doesn't work. I don't hear a lot of people disagree. Okay. The fact of the matter is, you really don't want people to be able to get into your systems. We actually put a security device in there that, bottom line, did extraordinarily well in keeping people out in 360. That's the only reason people would let us build it. But cyber, even then, this goes back to 2002, 2003, we were talking about doing this. This isn't recent. Has been an emergent issue, but at this point, it's gotten a bit out of control. You know, right now, data breaches are so common, as you guys know, that it's becoming mindless. I mean, people have made phishing an art form. So as you know, the WannaCry virus, which recently came out, took out basically anybody who had an old system they hadn't updated, got run over by it. And it was very, very cleverly designed. The other thing that most people don't know is, on average, you don't even know there was a data breach. Usually people are in your system 60, 90, 120 days. You have no idea they're even there because they're smart. What they do is they take your data and they collect all the precious stuff and they hide it in a memory area. And then all at once, they exfiltrate it out. And it's gone, just like that. Goodbye. It's really a huge challenge. The lack of a timely and actionable bit of intelligence about what's going on there is just killing us in this field. And the real problem is there aren't the skills. What does this have to do with AI? It's my last sort of, question. Bottom line is, if you don't apply an intelligent agent to this problem, it will become your worst nightmare. You have to understand the bad guys are smart. The bad guys will apply an intelligent agent and they will run us off the field. And the race is on where the good guys are using intelligent agents that look at what's going on in your system and they normalize it. You do not have to tell the thing, look for this virus, look for this activity. It says, hey, I've normalized the behavior, and all of a sudden you're sending all of your data to Botswana, a coffee shop. I don't think so, and shuts it down before it gets anywhere. Intelligent agents really are vital, and right now, to give you some perspective on it, currently you're actually talking days to weeks in a traditional response once you see they've gotten in. This is after they've been in for 60 to 90 days. You're talking about days to weeks to remediate. Currently, we'd use the same thing. We're using AI, and we can do it in usually minutes to hours. Again, factors of 100, factors of 1,000 improvement. And that's not taking into account the fact that an AI system many times will spot it instantly. If you don't believe this is serious, would you believe somebody set up roughly, inside job, they set up 15 accounts in a bank in the Middle East, $5 million each. Inside job, right? The accounts didn't exist. In the morning, they created, software. There they are. They had printed thousands, about 3,000 copies of cards, debit cards, against those accounts. Just 15 of them are unique. And they simultaneously, at an agreed-upon time, went to ATMs all over the world and emptied all non-existent accounts of $45 million. The system was so stupid, it didn't notice that somebody was standing 5,000 miles apart, actually withdrawing money from the same account with the same password and same card. That's where AI comes in. because it was done instantaneously and it was planned incredibly well. Yes, they did notice that $45 million suddenly went missing from the bank, but they noticed it after everybody involved was long gone with their money. Again, it's vital that we start to use intelligence. This is nothing compared to when somebody decides that you have a defibrillator and we're going to go hack it and set it off for our jollies. That's one of the nightmares of a connected universe. You have to be smart about it. I'm not saying to stop, not at all, but what I am saying is this is way more of an issue. I mean, things are moving so quickly in an area where we're exposed that I would hope that there's a lot of people paying attention, because when you're doing a digital update of your automobile and somebody gets in and decides to tell it that whenever you put it in drive, it goes into reverse, and whenever you touch the gas, it goes to flat out, this could be a really bad day. So again, and by the way, that's not an exaggeration. If anybody's ever seen, somebody decided to demo that on a Chrysler product, a Jeep, and demonstrated that you could drive it down the road, and they just said, make a left turn, and it did, into the grass. Fortunately, there was somebody sitting in the car standing on the brakes, which they shut off. You have to really take into account that the world is not a friendly place, and the guys who you're fighting against are incredibly bright, and you have to basically be as good or better than they are. We have created these immersive environments for AI that let you utilize it on a much broader level, and that's becoming really useful. This is scary stuff where you actually stand in a room, and for instance, one of the modes we do is if you want to do an acquisition, you can literally stand there and debate with the system what would be a good acquisition given the needs that you're going to undertake. So once again, very, very powerful stuff, but again, just be careful how you use it. The cognitive era is here, and it does allow collaboration, man-machine, to be the norm, and in fact, we're working it there. That's one of the seminal shifts. The other thing is we're storing knowledge. As I said at the very beginning, you cannot just store raw data. You will drown under that. The beauty of it is if you store knowledge, business will transform by intent. It will not be by experiment. You don't have to float a trial balloon that costs you $500 million to discover it doesn't work. And you guys can all think of horror stories. Remember the Edsel? Yeah, that worked out well. Anybody here actually know the story? I realize that most of you weren't born when I used, never mind. There you go. We got one. Thank you very much. I feel much better now. The bottom line is you also pick up velocity. You basically have an insight that's instantaneous about what is needed, what is possible, and what you do. And more importantly, in terms of dealing with our millennials and the next generations, your engagement model becomes pervasive. People expect to be able to access what they want, when they want it, and get the right answer now. That is the expectation. Here it is. That's your answer. And that's bottom line. I mean, the possibilities are limitless, but you just got to take it with a grain of salt and be really careful how you go about it, because not everybody out there is your friend. But I hope, I wanted to give you a sense that it's not all negative by any stretch of the imagination. What you can do is amazing. But I don't want to sell it as this is the answer to an end-all and be-all, because there's still big issues out there we all have to deal with along the way. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation. This has been a terrific meeting.
Thanks, Bernie. Really, really appreciate you sharing those insights with all of us. Given the interest of time, we probably only got time for a couple of questions. So please, when you do state your question, just please, we've got some roving mics, just please stand up and just state where you're from as well. So to the floor, if anyone's got any questions for Bernie.
Hi, Michael Schrag from MIT. What's the most important thing you believe IBM has learned trying to turn Watson into a platform as opposed to just cognitive systems as a service?
Man, that's a great question. Hire David Kenny. No, actually buy his company. There you go, which we did. I should explain. One of the, nobody's perfect. Well, we live that motto. There was an incredible euphoria. I mean, I was there in the room when we won Jeopardy, and I will tell you, watching this system do that was mind-blowing. The problem is the model that there was done, as you heard me, is we had 80 man-years effort in that. And so I thought about that, and I said, this is not scalable. Well, we went down that road, and unfortunately, what we did was we did a bunch of what I call bespoke efforts. The trouble is you very quickly run out of human beings if everything you do is a bespoke effort. what we did was about 2 years in, about a year and a half, 2 years in, we looked at this and said, you know, it's accelerating like mad, and then it hits a wall because you run out of people to do the next bespoke effort. And that's when it dawned on us, the most important thing we learned is, for crying out loud, make it a platform, which we have. So now if you go on Bluemix, which is a platform we have, you just log on, and there it is. You know, you actually can pick and point and click as to the various attributes you want to instantiate. You want natural language processing, great. You want to do it in standard Arabic, here's your pointer. And you just assemble it like a bunch of essentially easily accessible icons you can drag into a box and create an offering. And that's a very different strategy than bespoke. So that was a really important bit of learning, which is, as cute as the first example may be, it may not be the one you want to scale. And so that was incredibly important. See? I think we're saved. Sure.
Just wait for the microphone real quick.
I'm a sports mad individual, and I'm thinking of big data, and I'm thinking of Moneyball and the movies like that, and I'm thinking the next level. I mean, the examples you used were insurance companies and corporate companies, but can you think of big data taking it to the next level for sporting codes?
It's already being used, but I won't tell you by who.
Right.
Yes, that was absolutely, you bet. That was a fairly, I mean, sports is a perfect place you apply this. And yeah, there are actually teams out there that are utilizing exactly this capability. Because again, what humans are not good at is looking at something where there are 28 factors and identifying, really, these are the 3 that matter, and the other 2 you should ignore. And you know, AI is very, very good at carving those out. So yes, that actually is being done, but I can't, you know, out of respect to our client who would be really aggravated with me, I can't talk about it. But if you, I could point you at some raw data later.
Okay.
I think we're out of time anyway. Oh, there's one down front.
One last question we have time for, just on the end.
Hi, Dongwa from MP Capital. I've just got a question for you. Do you think Watson will be able to help us figure through ethics? Because if you think about driverless cars, for example, the question there is, if I'm in a car that's heading at a certain distance, speed, and there's an accident, who do you choose to save? Do you choose the driver that's in the car because they've paid for the car? Do you choose the, I guess, you know, if you veer left and you hit a building, that's going to cost $5 million because you know all that data, or you're going to choose to hit a pedestrian because, you know, they're a homeless guy? That sort of...
You actually expect me to answer that?
No. But just from the idea that Watson has a lot of deep data and just, you know, be able to think much faster and way deeper than I think a human being or a group of a committee can sort of work through.
That, in fairness, that was a good question. That question has appeared in the literature countless times. It's usually phrased as, you basically are driving down a hill, the car's brakes have failed in this automated vehicle, and it has a bunch of kids who are in the street, but if you continue down the street, you can go up a hill on the other side and stop safely, or, unfortunately, by hitting these kids, or you can slam the car into the wall and essentially save the kids, but you will die. And it's a classic question in AI. I don't have a good answer to that. There are many schools of thought. One is you simply program literally all these systems to preserve the life of the occupant. But remember that AI is being extended to the point it will be ultimately, hopefully, extended out to the individual. If you actually look at the predictions of the future, the holy grail is that you will actually have everybody with all your devices indicating where you are, what you're doing, not to take that data and actually run your life, but the kids themselves in that crosswalk would have been notified a long time ago that there's a car barreling down the hill, and they would step back out of the way, the car would progress, and nobody would get hurt. That is the holy grail, and it's not as bizarre as it seems. If you look at any of the large publications, they will actually show you photographs where they show big protective rings around vehicles. They're all collaborating so that you don't have high-speed intersecting collisions at points where you cross. So it's actually a very good question, but the way they're dealing with it is, instead of being backed in a corner by the question, they're saying, what in technology can I do so I don't face that decision? Which is, in my view, you know, how about we not kill anybody? That's better. I'd rather start with that presumption than let's kill a bunch of people and get on with life. So, but it is a legitimate question. So thank you very much for your time, and thanks to the organizers. They did a great job.
Great. Thanks, Bernie.